So welcome to Emotions Are Everywhere. Today we have Della Duncan, who is and I keep saying emotional. I keep wanting to say emotional economist. And it's like, yes, emotions are everywhere. But you're a renegade economist. And you're
Yes.
doing some amazing work around showing folks what it means to not buy into a system that really doesn't work for us, and offer maybe some alternatives that could work better for us and that help us sustain the planet in a different way. And we have some massive opportunities at the moment. And I'm really excited to talk to you about this. So tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be in this conversation with you. So I'm calling in from California, the hills of California in the Bay Area. And yes, I identify as a renegade economist, and that's just really about challenging and questioning traditional assumptions in traditional economic thinking. And in many ways, what is value, what is work, what's the goal of an economy, just all of that. And I really just try in general to work towards economic systems that are more equitable, more sustainable, and that just more contribute a sense of thriving to people on the planet.
Great. Okay, so now with the coronavirus situation, we have a massive, this is what I tried to say before, we have a great opportunity to make all sorts of changes. Are we actually doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question.
It's a big question. It's
It's a
like
big
saying,
question.
how do we resolve, how do we create world peace? I know it's a little bit on that level, but I'm just really curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I I really love the framing by Joanna Macy, who's an eco-justice Buddhist philosopher and activist. She just turned 91. She's in Berkeley, California, near me. And one thing that she does is she describes this time, and she doesn't say this time meaning the coronavirus, but she means this time in general. She describes it in a couple ways, and some of the ways she describes it is that we're both in a time of great unraveling, meaning our systems are unraveling. So our political systems, our ecological systems, social systems, as well as a time of the great turning, which is a time of turning towards life, turning towards life in our systems, in our ways of working, our ways of thinking. And she would actually say that it's not which story is true, it's that we can see both of them. And it's about which story we're choosing to get behind and we're choosing to support. So, and also the great turning is an acknowledging of the great unraveling and saying that it doesn't want that to be the last story. So, in relation to the coronavirus, I see it as not which story is winning.
Mm.
Are we getting better? I actually really like the quote, things are getting worse and worse and better, faster and faster. And I really resonate with that. And so for me, I do more check in with both of those stories right now. And I actually see signs and symbols of both. So in the realm of the great unraveling right now during the coronavirus, I see lots of civil liberties being taken, some really concerning things in countries where, like in the Philippines, people being shot for not staying in their homes or people being beaten in India. Also what's happening for garment workers and folks in the global south is sometimes they're having to choose between hunger and not having enough food and work and their health, right? So very difficult decisions. And then, of course, seeing the coronavirus as an inequality ratchet. This is one way to see right now where there are people who are actually profiting off of this time, including Jeff Bezos and Amazon. He's increased his fortune by 24 billion since the beginning of the coronavirus, as well as people who were already precarious and already suffering. They're even more suffering now in this time. You know, we have the meat packing plant workers, the garment workers, gig economy workers, and also the fact that Black and Brown and Indigenous people are far more likely to get sick and die from the coronavirus. So I'm seeing the great unraveling in all of those realms. On the other side, on the great turning, I'm seeing so many beautiful examples of solidarity and mutual aid. I'm seeing so many ways that neighbors are coming together. George Monbiot, the journalist in the UK, wrote an article called A Zombie Love Story, in which he said the we all thought that a pandemic would lead to flesh-eating zombies and like a horror film-esque state. But in fact, the pandemic has turned us into good neighbors. So there's a lot of beautiful expressions of solidarity and mutual aid, people helping each other with groceries and money and just supporting one another, reaching out to people they haven't talked to within so long just to see how they're doing.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then there's also beautiful advances in the ecological realm. We have so many examples of clear blue skies for the first time, or birds returning to the Wuhan province in China, or we have the dolphins in Venice and clear skies in LA. So we have all these beautiful examples. Domestic air travel being potentially canceled post-coronavirus in Europe. So there's all these beautiful things. The fact that people are turning towards permaculture and gardening, and the fact that seeds are one of the things that are being sold out of garden stores around the US. Like, that's a beautiful thing. So
and Australia.
And Australia too, great. So it's not which story is true. It's what are we choosing to see? Which story do we want to elevate, and which story do we want to get behind? So for me, I try to ask, how can I be a part of the great turning right now? And I think to see those stories, to elevate them, and to contribute to them is really the more interesting question that I'm exploring right now.
There's a metaphor that's been going around that I find really interesting, and I wonder what your thoughts are on that. The story of the caterpillar and that turns into the butterfly, and that when the caterpillar dissolves it and turns into the chrysalis, and it's basically caterpillar soup. And then out of nowhere, these new cells emerge, and some scientists calls them the imaginal discs, which I think is a great name. And these discs start showing up, and the caterpillar cells start attacking them, so they have an antibody response and they destroy these imaginal discs. But these keep popping up over and over and over again until they create like critical mass, and then the caterpillar cells basically give up. And it turns out that it's the imaginal discs that hold the blueprint for the butterfly, not the old cells. So it's that whole fight of the old against the new, and it's basically often used as a symbol for this is what's happening right now. So what are your thoughts on that?
Beautiful analogy. And it reminds me of a book that actually just came out right before the coronavirus by a man named Rob Hopkins, who's the founder of the Transition Network, the Transition Movement, one of the co-founders. And he wrote a book called From What Is to What If, and it's all about imagination. And there's so many wonderful people right now who are asking ourselves, what if, right? What could this post-corona world be like? And how could this time be, as you said, that kind of metaphorical soup that we're in that could then lead us into this emergence as a butterfly? So I do agree. I'm seeing a lot of that thinking and that question, and also just practicing that muscle. To imagine is something that we have to practice. And it's actually quite a radical act, because to imagine, you first have to know the state that we're currently in, and then to believe into the possibility of something other. So Joanna Macy talks about hope as not something that we have, it's not a noun, but something that we do. And so imagination, reimagining and imagining a different world is also a radical act, because it's a practicing of hope, of believing that we as humans can organize ourselves differently and better, both for the planet and for ourselves.
Yeah. What I see as somebody who's obviously really interested in emotions, which is what we're talking about, is that at the moment there's a lot of fear and frustration. And you and I both know that when somebody is in fear and in frustration and in fight flight mode, basically, creative thinking is very, very difficult. And so learning how to manage emotions is really crucial. But how do we, this is my challenge at the moment, is what kind of tools can we give people to say, we don't really need to be in fear? And let me start again, because what I really want to know is, when people are in fear and frustration, what can we do to say, hey, you don't really need to be in this space? And what kind of systems need to dissolve in order for that to happen? Because I think systems contribute to that, and beliefs. So what do we need to change in order to change the emotion so we step into this place of imagination? Really, again, a long question.
Yeah. So going back again to Joanna Macy, she offers something called the work that reconnects, and it's a embodied practice of moving into action on behalf of the world. And it's something I'm a facilitator in, and it has a whole process to it. But one of the steps on that process is called honoring our pain. And so she really speaks to the importance of honoring our pain and offers us practices and tools to do so. So what I would say is that I do try to honor my own pain and the pain of others, meaning be with. So compassion, to suffer with, to be with one in their difficult emotions and time, but one, to keep going, that too will pass, right? So to keep moving through it, not to wallow in our pain or kind of spin in our pain, but to keep moving through. And in that, honoring our pain is often also sharing about it, talking about it, speaking with someone else, saying I'm afraid or I'm worried. That's really helpful. And also knowing that the ways in which pain and trauma can be stored in our bodies. So actually like shaking it out, going for a run, dancing. I love dancing. And I'm sure you know about the animals and the ways that after a traumatic incident, they'll shake it out.
And we have a tool called TRE, Trauma Release Exercises, which actually teaches people how to shake it out. That's what I practice. So yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And so one of the practices that I do is called breathing through, and it's from Buddhism. It's Tonglen is the Buddhist name for it. And like people have different choices in regards to listening to the news. Personally, I think it's very important to listen to the news to stay aware of what's happening and to stay connected with the suffering in the world so that I'm able to act on behalf of it to end the suffering. So what I do is I listen to the news, and I imagine when I hear difficult information, I imagine that I'm breathing in the suffering that I'm hearing. I'm breathing it in. I'm as black smoke. I'm cycling it through my heart, bringing in compassion, empathy, kindness, and then I'm breathing out loving kindness, compassion for those folks. So I don't hold on to it. So to relate to what you're saying, I would say, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but it's not that I'm trying to deny my difficult emotions or push them away or push them aside, but more move through them in a way that's healthy, honor them, and then cycle that suffering through and move towards a place of compassion and kindness and care.
I totally agree with you. I actually have my campaign for this year is called 52 Emotions. And what I said, and I address one emotion every week. And I say to people, please don't differentiate between positive and negative emotions. They're pleasant and unpleasant, but they all have a positive intent. And when you understand what this emotion wants to tell you, no matter how shitty it feels and how uncomfortable, you'll be able to transform it into something that really you can utilize to become more compassionate, not just with others, but also with yourself. And you can move through it into being more productive and being more at peace. Yeah. So what I was actually interested in is we live in times where fear mongering is pretty common. You know, it's like, I hear you watching the news is really important. And I agree with you. But we're getting overloaded with news that is just about drama and about creating more fear. And, you know, it's all about survival. It's threatening our survival like this. And again, lots of things are changing all the time. You know, like I can't be consistent from one day to the next. The news changed. Like, this is allowed, this is not allowed. This is the drama that's happening. And I think we're also becoming more and more aware of the fact that we are all connected. This whole illusion of countries and, you know, and locations I think is going. But what could we change? What kind of beliefs could we change in order to let go of these emotions? And maybe what kind of practical approaches? I mean, like, again, what could governments do? What could institutions do to support us? We have previously talked about the universal basic income. Would that make a difference to fear and frustration and, you know, and grief and all of those? Again, I'm asking really big questions, and I'm just going, whatever comes out, Della.
Yes. So I really am a proponent on the topic of news on appropriate technology. So having technology serve us and not being in service to technology. So I am very deliberate about my news intake, and I would encourage folks to find the way that feels good for them. So I listen to one show, which is 1 hour, 5 days a week. and I go for a walk when I do it, and I don't do it first thing in the morning. So I just want to share, there are ways that we can consume news and be connected that don't overwhelm. And I invite people to explore what that balance might look like. So there's that piece. But I also, I really agree with something you said before about how our emotions can be, I see them almost as like alarms. Like if I'm feeling fear or worry or anxiety, I can tap into what this is, my body is telling me something. And often I can't pinpoint what that exact emotion is. Maybe I'll feel an upset stomach or tightened shoulders or a shortness of breath. But if I can just go into what is there and what is going on, and, explore what's the story that I'm telling myself there. And, sometimes the story is true. Like there are very valid reasons to feel grief or fear or anger, right? But to see that as a point of learning. And then this point about other people, Ram Dass has this great quote about, it's something like, thank you for triggering me, because when you trigger me, you show me what part of myself has yet to be healed or examined. So I look at, I would say difficult emotions, but I don't know how you would frame them, but I say that to be helpful for this conversation, like see them as signs pointing to that which I can heal and work on and move towards. Now, if we were to look to systemic interventions, I mean, it would be beautiful if you made a TV show about emotions, or I'm joking about, just that if we had more social and emotional intelligence, that was a regular part of education from a very early age.
Yes.
I would think that would be huge, because the more we're able to know what we're feeling, and not just know how we're feeling, but then communicate about it, and for me to also intuit and guess and interpret and ask you, what are you feeling? Because we're not mind readers, but there are subtle body stuff that we can.
And we do have mirror neurons that allow us to actually,
absolutely,
feel what somebody is.
Yeah. So I would say that's critical. But in general, of course, what would ease these difficult emotions are systems that do not lead to inequality, precariousness, or, fear, basically. So obviously, like universal healthcare, if I wasn't worried about, if I didn't have to choose between money and health, that would support that. Or if I had sick leave, if I had adequate protection from my employers, like all of that. So all of that would ease this. So the systemic intervention there is, universal needs being met from governments. Also local economies that are more resilient, where your neighbors, where you can know who to ask for help, whether it's a needs and offers board, more communication, right? So there's many systemic interventions that would help us not feel so precarious and afraid. And I do want to point out one more, is inequality in general. There's a really amazing book by Kate Pickett and Richard Wilkinson, two epidemiologists from the United Kingdom, and they show that everyone in a society is worse off in a more unequal society, even the wealthier people. That in terms of happiness and well-being and health, in a society where everyone is more poor but more equal, everyone is better off than a society where there's more material wealth, but it's highly uneven. And it's because we have these feelings of inadequacy in an unequal society, of precariousness, or of hoarding and fear that if you were wealthy, you might lose everything, or that people are trying to get you all the time. So it just, in solving inequality, whether through taxation, paying people more equally to begin with, redistribution of wealth, whatever it is, that would be a huge thing on our emotional well-being and state.
Yes. So emotional well-being, and I always look at how beliefs impact on that, because if I can change my perspective on something, and if I choose to believe something else, it will literally change my emotional state, because my perception drives my emotions. So if I consider something to be risky, then I will respond from that place. But if I consider it to be an opportunity, I will also come from that place. So now with the whole coronavirus situation, we have an opportunity to turn lemons into lemonade. And I'm always wondering how we can do that. And I love talking to people about beliefs. And it's about really becoming aware of what these beliefs do to us. And I'm using not the word victimization, do to us, but they impact on us. And they really change the way we think. So, and we have lots of beliefs around work and success and, and purpose, if we have any kind of relationship to purpose at work at all, because a lot of people just want to work to pay their mortgage, right? So what kind of beliefs have you found really, when you change them, really contribute to happiness?
So what I will answer that, but I want to just say a thing about beliefs right now, because yes, you're bringing that up as well. I hope that people will think about work during this time. I love that we now have this whole idea of like essential workers and who's essential. Like it's something that we haven't really thought about before. And so it's a really powerful thing. And I hope people start to examine what work is essential and not. And also I love how people are reevaluating the non-paid work as well. So care work and home work. I remember one tweet that I loved was somebody said, I've been homeschooling my 8-year-old and 6-year-old for 1 hour and 11 minutes. And I've already decided all teachers deserve $1 million a year. Just a really realizing, care of children, teaching, and also caretaking of a home is obviously work. And so just reevaluating that, but also, that, this whole thing about people having to decide between their health and work. And making money, I just wonder what that'll open up for people around what do they want their contribution to be and what is worth the risk, right? It's a really interesting thing. And then I also want to bring up a thing that I've been exploring is about our beliefs about death. Mm-hmm. And this has really come up largely due to Charles Eisenstein wrote an amazing article. I think it's one of the best articles I've seen during this time. It's called The Coronation. Mm-hmm. And Charles Eisenstein, The Coronation. And it's also present in Michael Moore's new documentary, Planet of the Humans, this idea of death and what is our relationship with death. I say our relationship, I mean a Western perspective, a white Western perspective, because of course there are many cultures that have totally different views on death. Yes. But I do want to say that I am seeing really interesting exploration from those two places around, do we have a denial of death? Do we have a fear of death? Like I have seen things saying like, do we want to see our loved ones die behind a piece of glass? Or would we have rather them come home and risk potentially getting the virus, but holding them in our arms while they die? Also, Charles Eisenstein in his essay asked he says his child has been without playing with another child for 2 weeks. Is that worth the potential not death of X number of people? What if it was a child playing by themselves for a whole year? What if it was his own death that was averted or his mom's death? Like, it's just a really interesting question of what is our relationship with death? What is like quote unquote natural? And just what we will do to avoid death. And he extrapolates it to like civil liberties. Like, will we go without hugging people for the rest of our lives if it will possibly avert death? Will everything move online if it's better for safety, right? So I do think this question of our beliefs around death. Now, you asked though, what would be beliefs that would change that would lead to greater happiness? I would say the number one thing that I work with, which might sound funny coming from an economist, but is around like the fact that I am whole. I am whole. You are whole. Each person is whole. I know it sounds very like,
no, I totally get that.
But that's been the greatest insight to me, that I don't need a partner to complete me. That I am whole and enough, and that I'm held by the universe. So even when I'm feeling completely alone, feeling completely isolated, we can be in isolation and not be lonely. Mm-hmm. And for me, there have been times when I have felt so alone and yet touched something at the bottom of that loneliness where I felt I am still held by the universe. And you can call that God or faith or spiritual essence or whatever you want to call it. But feeling that has resourced me and given me resilience in ways that I never knew were possible. And now I feel so much more capable of being in a relationship that ends, or, having a heartbreak or the death of a loved one, because it cannot touch or affect this deeper core of me. Nothing can.
Yeah. That's a great point. Look, the thing is, I don't think you need to believe in God or be religious or anything in order to understand that life has purpose. I would say that even if you're the strictest atheist, you would understand that there's meaning to something. Because otherwise, why bother being here? You might as well just go, why I might just make myself obsolete and I'll just go. And maybe that's the death relationship as well. I mean, we're getting into really deep stuff here, but it's the ability to actually say, there's reason for me being here. And I think this is the shift in consciousness that we're making at the moment. As you said, am I here to make money, or am I here to have a relationship with the people I love? Am I willing to risk my health to go and, earn money that may support a lifestyle that is actually not sustainable? I frequently have clients who are absolutely exhausted with their work and who feel that they are really wasting their time. They love their work, but they also don't like the conditions they're working under, because they can't spend time with their children. They have a very loose relationship with their partner. It's very functionally oriented to who does what, how do we organize ourselves? The weekends are all about activities. There's no time for being at all. And I often ask them, I said, so you've got the 5-bedroom house, you've got the 2 cars, you go on holidays twice a week, the kids go to private school, and how fulfilled do you feel? How happy are your children with seeing you for 2 hours on the weekend when you watch them on the sidelines of the football field, because the rest of the time you're working? And what's your relationship like? And I especially men, I have had so many men crying in my coaching sessions who are absolutely devastated because they don't see how they'll be able to resolve that. But now life is changing. They're working from home and they realize, I don't know about you, but I know that I don't really need that much. I don't really need to go and shop. And I've talked to people who say, when the shops here started opening again in Australia, people are going, yes, I can go shopping. And then they realized they didn't want to. I walked past a store yesterday that had sent me, the come and shop with us. Everything's going to be really cheap. We're offering you everything at 80% discount and all of that. And I looked at that. There was nobody in the shop. But before coronavirus, when they sent out these messages, that the place would be absolutely packed. So I don't know. So something is changing at the moment. And I really hope that, and I know this sounds really weird and I'd love your input on that, is I hope we're going to continue in this situation where we're physically distancing. And I know that's not a great thing for mental health, but we're finding different ways of connecting with each other. But I hope that we're continuing in this crisis, in this soup, and this chrysalis for a few more months. Because I think we need to be in it longer for us to understand the changes that we need to make. Mm-hmm. If we go back to normal now, we're going to go back to the same way we were before.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, I really resonate with what you just shared. And it reminds me of a story when I was researching universal basic income. I heard this story of a local government where the local government had a budget crisis. And what they did was they said, well, instead of laying a few people off, we're going to furlough everyone. So we're all going to go down to 4 days a week and less pay. Yeah. And at first the workers were really upset about this and they just didn't want it. And then they started it. And, in that extra day that they got, they started to learn how to play the guitar again, spend more time with their children, garden more. And sure, maybe they ate meat less often or took one less flight per year. There were certain things that they did differently, But eventually, when the government had the funding to bring people back to full employment, they said, no, thank you. So just this, I do also hope for people that this disruption of normal helps people really realize what really is important, and find greater balance. And you also talked about happiness. I think it's important to define what we mean by happiness, because there's hedonic happiness, which is pleasure-seeking happiness from like massage and good wine and good food. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just one part of happiness. And then there's eudaimonic happiness, which is from eudaimonia, and it's much more about our service and our contribution, and just acknowledging that that is a part of our desire, as part of our needs. We want to contribute, right? And we have a choice in that contribution. And my personal favorite definition of happiness comes from Bhutan, the Kingdom of Bhutan, from the former Prime Minister Jigme Tinley. He said, "True abiding happiness cannot exist while others suffer. True abiding happiness cannot exist while others suffer, and comes only from living in harmony with nature, serving others, and realizing the true and brilliant nature of our own minds." And so I really love that expanded view. And so, yeah, alternative economics, renegade economics for me is all about what you're talking about, redefining success, redefining what is progress, what is development, questioning all of that, and really returning to a deeper sense of purpose and on supporting the flourishing of all beings, human and non-human. So I also hope for folks to have that realization, reconnection, and to, if they utilize this time, to then come out of it with a renewed commitment to that.
Well, I hope that that's going to happen, because I mean, I know that you are you're a gross national happiness master trainer in Bhutan, and so you've taken this thinking to a very refined level that probably a lot of people still have to attain. I mean, your way of thinking is in such a way that a lot of people may not really understand what this means. I mean, I just talked to somebody on the phone last week who had told one of the people in her team that she needed to also furlough and reduce the salary, go down to 60%, or it was 60%. And this person had a massive fit of anger and frustration about the fact that this was not going to be possible, because they were so used to a refined lifestyle that nobody else would understand, so that she should basically be entitled to more, and that the money should come from other people, that their salaries should be reduced, hers shouldn't be. It was like, seriously? And there was this sense of entitlement, and it was really, I mean, to talk to somebody on that level, that is really challenging. And when we're talking to people who still operate from, I need to pay my mortgage, I'm the only breadwinner in the house, and I am entitled to my hedonistic pleasures, my good wine, my massages, and all of that. How do we change somebody's mind around that?
I think one thing you're getting to is equity instead of equality, right? Like, because you're absolutely right that for somebody who's like, maybe they're a single parent and they're taking care of 2 kids, like they may need a specific amount. So in that kind of company setting, it would be ideal to work collectively and collaboratively on what those needs are. However, I hear what you're saying about somebody who may, for their reasoning, be that they deserve or are entitled to, and that they also want their hedonic lifestyle. And you can't really argue with what makes someone happy. It's very difficult. But certainly that's definitely a belief that if shifted can bring greater happiness. That idea of course, what is happiness, but also the idea of going from a rugged, isolated individual, as in I'm deserving of all the wealth that I have and I'm entitled, to a way of thinking that's more interconnected, more solidaristic, more appreciating of all the labor that went into them having the labor that they do. Like I often think about pay differentials in businesses. And if a group of people decide, let's say a worker cooperative, if they decide on the pay differential, it's not that great, maybe like 1 to 6. So like the highest paid worker makes 6 times the lowest paid worker. But when we look in the US at the average, it's actually the middle worker, the middle worker to the highest worker is 1 to 350 times. So, humans, when we agree, we actually agree on a much smaller pay differential. And that kind of thinking that somebody is, their time, their energy, their effort is so much worth more than anyone else is a very difficult way of thinking, and really leads to a lot of suffering. So, I would have empathy for that person that you described, because they seem to have a lot of attachment and a lot of grasping. And I would question whether they really truly are happy with all of their wealth that they have. You even mentioned like the way people would see me, right? So I feel a lot of compassion for them, and I would hope for them that they can have a shift in thinking and a reevaluation of what's really important and what really truly brings them happiness. So that's a very difficult situation. I'm sure you handled it beautifully, but very difficult.
And again, we're seeing lots of other examples at the moment, like leaders who really step into a service role, again, and contribute on whatever level, like Trevor Noah, for example, who is doing his daily show at the moment from home, is paying all of his crew from his own salary because, there's no money available, and he wants to just keep it going, and he wants to support people. And you can consider that to be an essential service because, the news and the information he brings out is not just entertaining, but it's also important because he's also about expanding mindsets. But you also have other CEOs in the normal economy who are not paying themselves any money this year at all, just to make sure. And these are the people who are earning 300-400 times the amount of a median level worker. And I think that's wonderful, and so I'm just thinking, my thing is this just going to be a temporary measure, or are we going to stay in this mindset? Will we actually start looking at what are things worth? Because I know that there's a lot of thinking around what can I charge at the moment. And I know for me, for example, is I would, if I could give my services away for free, I would do it in a heartbeat, but I have to live myself.
Of course.
And I saw an interview with somebody the other day who said, as a coach, as a speaker, as a trainer, I feel really bad about charging at the moment. And this guy said, look, I went to the pharmacy the other day because my daughter had a headache and I needed to go and get some aspirin. And I still paid for that, even though it was an essential service. And even though, like a speaker, like a trainer, we're also contributing to other people's well-being, and, we still need to charge. So the question is what do we charge? This whole inequality that you mentioned, how will we overcome that? What will it take?
Yeah, beautiful question. And I love one of your early questions about what is worth. And I want to bring in a good friend of mine, Leanne Faux. She said, the sign of a healthy economy should be a drinkable river. And I just think That's of, beautiful. What is worth is, drinkable rivers, beautiful, thriving ecosystems, trees, can we actually even attribute monetary value to water or to a tree or to carbon? Like, does that even make sense to a human, right? Really interesting things around worth and value. But, to your other point, really good point. And there's a quote that I love that's, you can't live rightly in a wrong world. And what I mean by that is I may be very idealistic and hope for one day when we all have universal access to meet our needs. So housing is a right, and our access to land to grow food and vegetables is a right, and seeds is a right? All of that, healthcare, adequate education, etc. And then our labor can be something that we can charge for or not charge for, depending if we want. Like, yes, that is a utopian vision, a beautiful vision. But until we're in that place, you're right that we as consultants, coaches, teachers, we have to make a living to meet our basic needs. I do work with people on how can you reduce the amount of money that you need to meet your needs, as in what are the creative ways you can meet your needs outside of the monetized economy. So some folks join, community gardens where they grow some of their vegetables, or they'll create like a babysitting club where they'll take turns babysitting each other's children. No money is exchanged, but they kind of each take care of children one night a week or something like that. So there are creative ways that people meet their needs outside of the monetary economy. That being said, of course, we still need money. So what I do with the coaching that I do is that actually I do it by donation. So I do it 100% by donation. And what this does is it severs the expectation that folks have from the service that I'm providing. If I told someone my hour of time of coaching is X amount, then it kind of plants, even if they don't try to, an expectation of a dollar amount of that hour, of that experience, whatever that means to them, whether that's a lot or a little. And it's a very pernicious, difficult thing. But when I sever that and I tell them, I'm giving you this hour freely, this is a gift from me to you. And then after that, you have the opportunity to give a gift to me of financial value. And it's totally up to you how much that amount is. But I say, it's a practice of generosity, and you can choose that point where you feel generous and not stingy, but you also don't feel like you're hurting yourself. And that point is different for everyone. Yeah. But people do tend to be quite generous because they feel the gift being given to them and they want to gift give. But it also allows for folks with more income to pay more than I might normally charge. And it also allows for people who maybe wouldn't have the means to pay as much as they can. Right? So that's one way that I work with it. It's not perfect in the way that if I did all of my work that way, I don't know how it works. Some teachers do, but it's something that I really enjoy, the gift economy. Yeah.
So would that work for a plumber? Would that work for, an accountant?
Yeah. I would say that one way that I've seen this is people have taken, okay, what are my actual expenses? Like if I was a plumber, if I had to drive, okay, how much is the car driven, like the miles? How much is the materials, the tools that I need? And then the labor would be by donation. Like I've seen that for retreats or courses. So that's one way you could deal with that. But yeah, that is an interesting question. There's also something called time banks where it's actually hour for hour instead of money. So if I were a plumber, I could offer 1 hour of plumbing, and then I have a credit of 1 hour, and then I can use that 1 hour of credit for any service that I want. Let's say an hour of legal counseling. So then it's a great equalizer. So 1 hour of plumbing is equal to 1 hour of legal counseling, is equal to 1 hour of Spanish tutoring, is equal to 1 hour of coaching. Yeah. So that's beautiful. And that's a great equalizer. And I do like to think, like, why is one person's hour so much more worth one of my hours? Like, what is it that they're doing, or what? So it's very complex, but I do love to think about those questions.
Yeah, that's how I do my trades. When I swap with people, it's one hour for 1 hour, and it doesn't matter what it is. It's just 1 hour for 1 hour because it's time. And that's what I value really the most. I mean, if we're talking about the 5 love languages, my love language is time. So, yeah. So, okay. So we're managing our emotions when we feel secure, when our basic needs are being taken care of and our emotional needs are being met through connection and belonging and purpose and all of that. And we have a real opportunity to do this at the moment and rethink. So COVID-19 is actually a great opportunity for us. Like, I mean, I know a lot of people see it as an absolute disaster. I don't. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. And we get to, as you said, we get to rethink what is work, what is happiness? What is it that really matters at the moment? So if you had a few closing words for us, one thing that you would say is really important for us to remember at this time that we can take with us into the future, what would that be?
I just want to affirm what you're saying, that we can see any disturbance in our life as a potential. like for living better or for change. So even the most devastating breakup or heartbreak or difficulty, like where's the silver lining? Not in an artificial way, but like what is the teaching in this for us? So I really hear you on your invitation to really see what is the teaching here? What is the lesson? What do we want to learn or relearn, remember? How do we want to come from this? Like, let's all see this as a potential and what the gift of this time is now. And actually, Dr. Stephen Harding, a great ecologist from Schumacher College, he said, perhaps this time is the earth giving us one last chance to learn to love and value the local, to be small, to slow down and consume far less, to be humble, to be beautiful again as a species within her vast, lustrous, earthly body. So yeah, what could this time mean for us as a species? And I'll add, to your point, what could this time mean for you? So if I had any parting questions or thoughts, I would say, how could you use this time to look at the work that you do in the world, all the work that you do, the care work, the volunteering, the gardening? Where do you want to place your efforts, your attention, your energy? I'm not denying that you may need to make money, of course. Yes, of course. But what are the ways in which you want to contribute to the world right now? And how can you see this as an opportunity to disrupt that? And then what about your habits? What about your habits, your ways of thinking? So on all levels of your being. And then what are the larger systems changes that you want to be a part of? You know, what is the you? What is the metamorphosis that wants to take place? What is the butterfly that wants to emerge, both as you as an individual and the one you want to contribute to, the what is to what if? Like, what is that what if that you want to grow? And then finally, just to reiterate, what is happiness to you? What is real wealth? What is worth? What is value? What is valuable to you? What are you learning about yourself and about what's important to you during this time? And how can you go forth with a different sense of progress and purpose and growth and contribution? So I wish for everyone that they have at least a brief moment, because I know not everyone is in a pause, but just a time to use this disruption to think differently and to move forth as part of the great turning. So the turn towards a more life-sustaining, life-enabling, life-thriving world.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Della. That has been an amazing conversation, and I know it's given me so much food for thought, and it's definitely going to get me to look at, all of these things even more in depth than I have. You asked some really beautiful questions, and I'm sure that you don't have the answers, but you have the great ability to guide people into doing their own thinking. So I hope this has been an invitation that a lot of people follow up on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And it's always a joy to speak with you. I'm grateful for every opportunity. So thank you. And for the work you do.